Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel, as this is my first official video on my new true crime channel, Samantha M. So if you're new, welcome, thank you so much for being here. If you came from Samantha Melanie, my main channel, thank you for your ongoing support. I'm not gonna keep this intro too long. I want to get straight into today's case, which is going to be a two-part series. So this is part one. So let's get into the case of the Claremont serial killings. So between 1996 and 1997, 3 women went missing off the streets of Claremont in Perth under incredibly similar circumstances. On January 26th, Australia Day, 18-year-old Sarah Spiers went missing. Then on June 9th of that same year, in almost the exact same location, 23-year-old Jane Rimmer also disappears. And then again in the following year, on March 4th, 1997, 27-year-old Ciara Glennon goes missing once again in almost the exact same circumstances. The media dubbed the case the Claremont Serial Killings. And this case turned out to be Australia's longest running and most expensive murder investigation. It sent fear through young women and men and the parents of these young women and men. A little bit of background information: Claremont's quite a wealthy suburb and it was considered a particularly safe suburb at the time as well. It was almost described as having a bit of a country town feel to it. It was a place where everyone kind of knew everyone, and it also had a really thriving nightlife at the time for the younger crowd. So in this video I'm going to walk you through the victims, what happened to them, the investigation, what has been solved, and the case that has been going on for 22 years. So starting in 1996 with 18-year-old legal secretary Sarah Spiers. So Sarah was heading out for a night in Claremont with friends to celebrate Australia Day. They began their night at the very popular Ocean Beach Hotel in Cottesloe, and Sarah's sister Amanda was actually acting as a bit of a chauffeur for Sarah and her girlfriends. And so when they decided they wanted to move on for the night, which was around midnight, her sister Amanda came and picked her up. And it was quite common for Amanda to give her little sister a lift, as the two actually lived together. She dropped the bunch of girls off in Claremont at Club Bay View, and Amanda headed home. And this would be the last time Amanda would ever see her little sister Sarah. So at around 2 AM that night, or that morning, Sarah decided that after a long day of socialising and partying, it was time to wrap it up and call it a night, and she decided to catch a taxi and head home. Sarah had actually made some loose plans to catch a taxi together with some of her girlfriends, but by the time her friends had finished all of their goodbyes, Sarah had left. Before leaving the club, Sarah stopped to have a brief chat with the club's security guard, who she knew fairly well, before heading off down the road to call for a taxi on the payphone. And keeping in mind, of course, back in 1996, no one had mobile phones, so the only way to get a taxi was to use a payphone. Sarah placed a call to the taxi service, Swan Taxis, at 2:06 AM, telling them she would be at the corner of Stirling Highway and Stirling Street. Sarah requested that her taxi take her home to Mosman Park when she called them, which was not actually her home. However, a friend had actually offered her a place to stay for the night, which was in Mosman Park, and as Mosman Park was closer than Sarah's house, that would have made the taxi fare cheaper, and therefore it would have made sense for Sarah to be heading to Mosman Park instead of her own home. So 2 men, or some reports did state 3 men, I don't think it really matters. There were witnesses, gentlemen that were sitting in their car at a red light intersection at the corner of Stirling Highway and Stirling Street, and these men actually did see Sarah Spiers waiting for her taxi. And the 2 men had actually talked amongst themselves about how it really wasn't safe for a young girl to be out that late at night standing on this dark street alone when there had actually apparently been sex attacks in that area recently. When the two men looked back behind them in their rearview mirror, they saw another car approaching the intersection and turn off where Ciara Spiers was standing, so they had assumed that that was her lift home. This mystery car turned its lights off and pulled over, and the men that had witnessed Ciara actually kind of thought the situation seemed a little bit odd, and they did contemplating checking up on the girl that at the time they didn't know. However, they decided amongst themselves that they were probably overreacting, left the situation and drove off. When they looked back once more, Ciara was gone. It was only 3 minutes in between the time Ciara called her taxi and the time that she disappeared from the spot in which she was waiting. So 8 minutes after Ciara placed her call to Swan Taxis, her taxi arrived to the agreed waiting area. However, Ciara was nowhere to be seen, and Ciara Spiers was never seen again. So of course, Ciara's older sister Amanda, who I mentioned she lived with, noticed that Ciara had failed to return home, and she got in contact with Ciara's friends who also had not heard from her all weekend, and this sparked a series of incredibly frantic calls to all of Ciara's friends asking if they had heard from her, but they hadn't. And it wasn't actually until Monday morning, when Ciara did not turn up for her job as a legal secretary, that her father, Don Spiers, reported her officially as a missing person. And this case was initially treated just as a missing person. She was a young 18-year-old girl. Chances are they believed she would show up again. However, her friends and family knew this was extremely out of her character. So Don Spiers actually told detectives Ciara was a very caring person and very attached to Amanda, who was her best friend as well as her sister. For her not to keep in contact with Amanda is very strange. So friends and family of Ciara Spiers saturated Perth with missing persons posters. And as a side note, I actually remember seeing some of these posters, so they really did saturate Perth with these posters, if I myself can remember seeing one of them. But of course, these missing persons posters led to nothing. And of course, again, keeping in mind, there was no social media back in 1996, so posters were really one of the effective ways that friends and family could contribute to a search outside of traditional media. While it was technically still a missing persons case, as the days went on, police did eventually treat Ciara's case as a homicide. So detectives knocked on virtually every door in Claremont and quizzed every taxi driver in the area that night. And Club Bayview, the club Ciara was last at, even offered a $10,000 reward for any information on the disappearance of Ciara Spiers. Then days turned into weeks, and police told Ciara's family that they must brace for the worst, as they believed that Ciara had unfortunately met with foul play that night. So with really no leads and no trace of any evidence or clues, it was as though Ciara had just vanished into thin air that night. Detective Paul Ferguson stated, "No one had seen her get into a car, there was no crime scene to provide us with any forensics, and there was nobody to tell us what type of offender we were dealing with." As unlikely as it may be, police had to consider the idea that Ciara may have just run away and did not want to be found. However, only months later, almost all hopes were dashed when another young woman went missing off the streets of Claremont under almost identical circumstances. So the aftermath for Ciara Spiers' family, as you can imagine, was horrific and harrowing, and maybe more than some, because they were actually harassed with calls from psychics and clairvoyants claiming to know where Ciara was. They were actually bombarded with over 400 calls. They harassed Don Spiers, Ciara's father, and demanded money from him in return for information on Ciara's whereabouts. Any information Don did receive ultimately led to nothing, and this led Don to fall into a incredibly deep depression. Don stated they were looking to make a name for themselves or get money. They hounded me to death. I'll be getting it every day. It was just an onslaught. They were sending me to certain locations, just running me around. They were telling me all sorts of things. They would give me cryptic clues. They had my emotions on a roller coaster. You'd be full of hope and you would be out searching and there'd be nothing. And then you'll go down in emotion again. I can't understand why anyone would do this to someone in my situation. Why would they want to make it worse for me? They probably all wanted to be recognised as being some high-profile clairvoyant. The Spiers family even received calls from members of the public harassing them. We had phone calls from people saying we are the perpetrators or saying that we deserved it, Don stated. The unbearable heartbreak of Sarah's disappearance, along with the utter horrific harassment the Spiers family received, caused Don Spiers to have a mental breakdown in late 1996. He described it as, I would sit in the lounge chair waiting for Sarah to come home, and it would be as if someone put a band around my head above my ears and was just tightening it. There was just immense pressure in a circle around my head. I was actually sitting there pulling my hair out. He was diagnosed with chronic depression after this, which he battled for 18 months. And unfortunately, to this very day, Sarah Spiers has never been found. So fast forwarding to June of that year, in 1996, June 8th, childcare worker Jane Rimmer was enjoying a night out with friends in Claremont at the Ocean Beach Hotel. Jane and her group of friends stayed there for about an hour before deciding to move on. So they called a taxi that was about 3.5 kilometres away to Claremont to the Continental Hotel to continue their night. They arrived at the Continental Hotel at around 9:30 and stayed there for a couple of hours before deciding to move on again to Club Bayview. And you may remember Club Bayview from being the same place Sarah Spiers was before she disappeared. So upon arriving at Club Bayview, Jane and her friends saw the incredibly long line and decided to not go in and just call it a night. As the group of friends made their way to the taxi rank outside of the Continental Hotel, Jane actually had a last minute change of mind and told her friends she decided to stay out and was going to head back to the Continental Hotel to continue having some fun. Her friends took this as her wanting to just go out and meet someone for the night. Jane was actually seen on CCTV footage outside of the Continental Hotel just after midnight, and it looked as though she was waiting for someone. In the footage we see a man approach Jane and Jane's face lights up with a massive smile, clearly indicating that she must know who this man is. However, this man's back is to the CCTV cameras and we cannot see who he is. So the CCTV footage pans to another part of the hotel and then pans back to where Jane was 28 seconds later, and Jane is once again by herself without the mystery man. Jane stands there for another 3 minutes, and at 12:04 AM Jane looks at her watch. The camera switches positions once again to another part of the hotel and it goes back to where Jane was once more. However, this time she is gone and the mystery man is nowhere to be seen. And this is the last known sighting of Jane Rimmer. And we will go back to this CCTV footage evidence several times throughout this video or this series. There's a lot to say about it, put it that way. But from what we heard just then, possibly we can assume that Jane Rimmer was standing there waiting for the mystery man to come back to pick her up and take her somewhere, or waiting for a lift, as she was facing the road and looking at her watch. That is of course just a theory. There was no video footage of Jane getting into anyone's car and no witnesses either. And funnily enough, this mystery man has never come forward. So more than 700 people were interviewed from the Claremont area that night in an effort to identify this mystery man. And frustratingly to me and to others, police waited 12 years to release this CCTV footage to the public. I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm sure they had their reasons, and I do know that part of their strategy on this case was to keep as much information as possible hidden, so they basically had a, what's the saying, like a card to play with. So if there was any sort of false confessions, they could weed them out. But this could have been invaluable footage. Someone may have recognized this mystery man, which we still don't know to this day who he was. And they did actually state, I believe, take it with a grain of salt, that they didn't release the footage initially because it wasn't clear enough, and they actually sent the footage to NASA to get it cleared up. But I will insert the footage if I can, which I should be able to, and you'll see that the footage really, even now, isn't clear. But if it had been released close to when she went missing, someone may have recognised this man. Someone may have been able to figure out what happened to Jane Rimmer. And not releasing this CCTV footage is widely considered a mistake by not just me but the general public. So the next day after Jane's disappearance, Jane failed to turn up to a Sunday lunch with her family. Her parents, Jenny and Trevor Rimmer, spent the afternoon searching Jane's apartment and contacting Jane's friends. Jane Rimmer was officially reported missing when she failed to turn up for work on Monday, similar to Sarah. And of course, as you can imagine, Jane Rimmer and Sarah Spiers' case were very quickly linked together, considering they were so incredibly similar. So on August 3rd of that same year, all hopes were dashed in finding Jane Rimmer when her body was discovered. Her naked body was found in bushland in Wellard, which is 40 kilometres south of Perth's CBD. The discovery of Jane's body was made by a mother named Tammy, who has never disclosed her last name, who was out picking arum lilies, or lilies that are also known as the death lily or the funeral flower, with her husband and 2 young children. Tammy had picked 2 of the lilies when a large arum lily caught her eye in the distance. Upon spotting this lily, Tammy's eye was caught by something else, and suddenly she realised she wasn't alone. Tammy screamed and her husband came running. Tammy just kept repeating to her husband, "She is there, she is there." While Tammy's husband tried to get her to come back to the car and go to the police station, Tammy refused to leave the body by itself any longer. Jane Rimmer's body was naked and badly decomposed after 54 days of being exposed to the elements, and it has never been revealed how Jane Rimmer died. Meanwhile, Sarah Spiers' family was no closer to finding her. They were still handing out flyers, and there was a billboard poster with Sarah's face on it, but nothing resulted in this. Taxi drivers were also very closely scrutinised in the months following Sarah and Jane's disappearance, as it is believed that neither woman would have gotten into the car of a stranger willingly. And it was believed for a long time it was a taxi driver. They were, when I say scrutinised, they were really scrutinised. I think it was really believed for a long time that taxi drivers were responsible, and for that matter it sent fear through a lot of people to actually catch a taxi. So fast forwarding to March of 1997, where 27-year-old Ciara Glennon, who was a lawyer, had just returned home from a year-long trip through Europe to her home in Perth, Australia. She had also returned home for her sister's wedding the following week, in which she was set to be a bridesmaid. On Friday, March the 14th, she was attending work drinks with some colleagues. So Ciara had returned back to the job she had previously had before leaving on her European year-long trip, and these drinks were at the Continental Hotel. So Ciara had actually told her mother that she was really quite tired and did not feel up for going for work drinks that night, and her mother suggested she just stay home and rest for the evening. However, Ciara insisted that she had to go. Just before midnight, Ciara told her workmates she was calling it a night and leaving to get a taxi. She walked down Bayview Terrace to Stirling Highway. A man that was sitting at a bus stop on the road that Ciara was on shouted out to her that she was crazy, presumably referring to the previous 2 disappearances the previous year. However, Ciara just waved him off and kept walking. On Stirling Highway, Ciara was seen walking past Claremont Baptist Church and was seen by the man sitting at the bus stop talking to the occupant of a light-coloured car near the traffic lights of the intersection of Stirling Street. He described Ciara as leaning over with her hands on her knees, talking to whoever the occupant of the mystery car was. When the bus stop man turned and looked back, Ciara and the car were both gone. Ciara had only been 10 minutes from her home. However, as it actually had been quite dark on that street that night, it cannot be confirmed that she got in that car. She could have kept walking, maybe she just saw a mate in that car, but surely that mate would have come forward and stated that they had seen Ciara that night, but they didn't. So several other witnesses claimed to see Ciara along the highway that night. However, these are all unconfirmed sightings. And unfortunately, this was the last ever sighting of Ciara Glennon. The next day, Ciara failed to turn up to a hairdressing appointment, and then even more importantly, she failed to turn up to her sister's hen's party, and this prompted her family to immediately call the police. So 3 weeks after Ciara Glennon disappeared, a man walking in bushland off Pipperdingy Road in Eglinton found the partially clothed body of Ciara Glennon. So at this point, the police and the public were well aware that they had a serial killer on their hands.
I've been pushing away everybody I love. I don't know what to do, need a sign from above.